ready to tackle one of history's biggest stories.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
Today we're diving deep into the Tower of Babel.
A story that just keeps coming back, doesn't it? Art, books, even everyday language.
We're going way beyond just the once upon a time version, though.
Right, because what makes the Tower of Babel so fascinating is how much it still speaks to us now.
So for this deep dive, our trusty guide is the Tower of Babel: Ambition, Language, and the Human Condition.
Excellent choice. That'll give us some solid historical context.
We're talking ancient civilizations, the mystery of languages, and who knows, maybe even some real-world ruins.
Let's start at the very beginning. Genesis, right after the whole flood situation.
Humanity gets a do-over, everyone speaking the same language. Picture it, total understanding.
All gathered together on a plain called Shinar, Mesopotamia, for those playing geography bingo at home.
Kumbaya moment, right? Not so much.
Nope, they decide, let's build a city. Which, okay, ambitious, but not necessarily bad.
But then, the tower, this huge tower, meant to reach the heavens.
The text really emphasizes their desire to, and I'm quoting here, make a name for themselves and prevent being scattered.
Whoa, ambition alert. Even way back then, everyone wanted to be famous, leave their mark.
Exactly, that desire to control their destiny, to be remembered. I mean, hasn't that always driven humanity?
Totally. Okay, but God looks down and is not happy.
Yeah, not a fan. To God, it's pure hubris, that over-the-top pride of thinking you're bigger than you are, basically.
Like they were saying, move over, God, we got this.
And that's when things go sideways.
God's like, nope, not happening.
And decides to, quote, confuse their languages. Bam, tower construction screeches to a halt.
Can you imagine? 1 minute you're explaining how to mix mortar, next minute it's all blah, blah, blah.
Total chaos. Which is why Babel itself is so clever. It comes from the Hebrew word meaning to confuse.
We still say babble today to mean like nonsensical talk.
Right. It's that feeling of, I have no idea what you're saying.
But okay, hold on. Before we paint these ancient folks as total villains, wasn't there some good in their ambition too?
That's a great point. They were trying to achieve something incredible, to connect, to build something that would last.
Like maybe it came from a good place initially.
Totally. It shows how ambition itself isn't bad. It can drive us to innovate, to progress.
But when it goes unchecked, yeah, that's when problems start.
Babel becomes this classic cautionary tale, a cosmic reminder to stay humble, you know?
So it's way more than just a messed up construction project.
It's about so much more. Ambition gone wrong, for sure, but also what makes us human.
And over time, people have interpreted this story in so many ways.
Oh yeah, like looking into a prism, you get different reflections depending on the angle.
Some see it as that warning against arrogance, like we just said.
Others focus on how it explains all the different languages we have. Before Babel, everyone's on the same page, literally. After, boom, linguistic explosion.
It's kind of amazing though, right? Like initially, it's presented as a punishment, all this language diversity.
Right, but couldn't it also be this awesome testament to how adaptable humans are?
Think of all the cultures, the art forms, the ways of thinking we have now.
It's like this beautiful, chaotic mixtape of humanity, and it all traces back to this one event.
But one thing that really gets me is that whole unity versus division theme in the story.
Oh, that's huge, and so relevant today.
Think about it. Starts with everyone totally united, same goal, same language. Then, damn, instant fragmentation.
It's like a snapshot of society, isn't it? We have these forces pulling us together and tearing us apart.
Like social media, it can connect people globally, but also creates these echo chambers where everyone just agrees with each other.
It's like we're building our own digital towers of Babel, all this potential for connection, but also for isolation.
It's mind-blowing that a story about ambition and communication from like thousands of years ago still resonates so strongly.
It's timeless, really.
But here's where it gets really interesting, at least for me. Was there ever an actual physical Tower of Babel?
Now you're getting into the historical mysteries.
Because the Bible kind of blends real events with symbolism, right?
It does. So while we haven't dug up a tower that exactly matches the description, there might have been inspiration.
I'm thinking ziggurats. Those Mesopotamian temples, basically giant staircases reaching for the sky.
Oh yeah, you can almost picture those ancient people thinking, hey, heaven's right up there, let's go.
And there's one in particular, the enigmatic ziggurat in Babylon, dedicated to Marduk, huge god, massive structure.
Exactly, we're talking colossal. And coincidentally, or maybe not Babylon, Babel.
It makes you wonder.
For sure. But even if we never find a definitive Tower of Babel site.
The idea of it, that ambition, the consequences of miscommunication, those themes keep popping up everywhere.
And that's what's really powerful. We'll dig into that more in the next part of our deep dive.
Babel's legacy in art, literature, even music, and how it helps us understand the world we live in today.
It's gonna get good.
Those ziggurats, I mean, talk about ancient ambition.
Yeah, it's like they were saying, sky's the limit, right?
Makes you wonder if they really believe they could reach heaven just by building high enough.
It's that human urge, isn't it, to connect with something bigger, to push boundaries.
And that's what's so cool about the Tower of Babel. It's not just an old story, it's like a reflection of US.
Totally. We're still building towers in a way, aren't we?
Exactly. Reaching for progress, for understanding, for connection.
Think about technology, for example. The internet, instant communication across the globe. It's like a digital tower spanning continents.
But even with all that, we're still bumping up against that same Babel problem, the unity versus diversity thing.
It's always there, that tension, like we're trying to build these bridges between cultures, but something keeps pulling us apart.
Definitely. And this is where Babel's warning gets really real, I think.
Oh yeah, if we go into those connections thinking our way is the only way, well.
Recipe for disaster. Just look at how divided things are politically in so many places.
It's like everyone's speaking a different language even when they're using the same words.
Tell me about it. I've had conversations where it's like, we're both speaking English, right? So why aren't we understanding each other?
Exactly, and that's what Babel gets at. Beyond just literal languages, it's about that deeper miscommunication.
Yeah, it's like cultural differences, different values, even just different ways of thinking.
We all have our own internal languages shaped by our experiences.
So how do we bridge those gaps then? Because it feels like miscommunication is at the root of so many problems.
Well, Babel gives us some clues, actually. First off, humility. Huge. Recognizing that our way isn't the only way.
Instead of trying to force our views on others, we should be genuinely curious about where they're coming from.
Right, that curiosity is key, and it ties into the second big lesson from Babel. Active listening.
Not just hearing the words, but trying to get the why behind them.
Decoding each other's internal languages, so to speak, because sometimes the words are just the tip of the iceberg.
And while we're on the topic of communication, Babel also makes me think about choosing our words carefully.
Oh, 100%. Words have power. They can build bridges, but they can also be weapons.
You know, it's interesting, we've been talking about the negative side of Babel a lot, but wasn't there also something positive in their ambition?
Ooh, that's good. You're right. They were trying to build something together, even if it was misguided.
Like, imagine that energy, that drive to collaborate, but channeled towards something that actually benefits everyone.
Exactly. That's the potential Babel points to. Instead of towers that isolate us, what if we built bridges of understanding?
Bridges that celebrate our differences, but also connect us on a deeper level.
Love it. And these bridges aren't just metaphorical. There are tons of organizations promoting intercultural dialogue, initiatives fostering empathy across borders.
It's like taking that Babel energy and turning it into something positive, something lasting.
Right on. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground: the biblical story, the different interpretations, the historical connections, how Babel relates to our world today.
We've even touched on how it speaks to our ambitions, our communication struggles, and ultimately, our potential to build something better.
Nicely summed up. But before we wrap things up completely,
it's one more piece we can't leave out: Babel's impact on art and literature.
Oh yeah, that's where you really see how deeply this story has sunk into the human imagination.
It's like artists and writers keep coming back to it, exploring those beams in endless ways.
We mentioned Bruegel's painting earlier with all that chaos and those impossible structures.
And there's so many more examples. Escher's staircases, that crazy cityscape in Lang's Metropolis.
And don't even get me started on literature. Borges' Library of Babel, for example.
Oh yeah, that one's wild. It's like a library containing every possible book, every combination of letters.
It's about the vastness of knowledge, but also its limitations. Like, even with all those books, we still might not find the answers we're looking for.
And what about Calvino's invisible cities? Each city is like its own little Tower of Babel, all these interconnected systems and layers of meaning.
It challenges our ideas of communication and understanding in such a cool way. And let's not forget music.
True. Composers have been using music to evoke the story's themes for centuries. Ambition, chaos, that search for unity amidst the differences.
It just goes to show how powerful a story can be. It can transcend time, cultures, even art forms.
And that brings us back to the big question: why should we care about the Tower of Babel today?
Because it's not just about bricks and mortar, right? It's about us, our desires, our fears that struggle to connect in a world that can feel very fragmented.
It's a reminder that communication is both our greatest tool and our biggest challenge.
Perfectly put. And that the towers we build, whether they're physical or metaphorical, need a strong foundation.
A foundation of understanding, of empathy, of humility. Otherwise, they're bound to crumble.
And as we move into the final part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this. What if we saw the Tower of Babel not just as a warning, but as a challenge?
Ooh, I like that.
A challenge to build better, communicate better, to truly embrace our shared humanity. Because remember, the story doesn't end with the tower falling down.
It ends with new beginnings, new languages, new possibilities.
Exactly, and it's up to us to decide what kind of future we're building.
Welcome back.
Feels like we've climbed our own Tower of Babel today, all this talk.
We have ambition, communication breakdowns, ancient ruins.
And now we're at the top, looking out. So what do we take away from all this?
Because let's be real, Babel's not just some dusty old story. It's about US.
It is. Our deepest wants, our biggest mess-ups, those things never really change.
One thing Babel screams at us is, be humble.
Those builders, man, they thought they had it all figured out.
And look what happened. Sometimes the smartest thing we can do is admit we don't know everything.
Step back, reassess, course correct. That takes courage.
Speaking of things Babel taught us, can we just emphasize again how important clear communication is?
Oh my gosh, yes. When we fail to understand each other, that's when things fall apart.
Chaos, missed opportunities, hurt feelings. And in our world where everyone's connected all the time, it's even more crucial.
I'm with you there. It's not just about the words, it's how we listen, how we respond. Are we building bridges or walls?
It's remembering that even when we disagree, we're all human. Part of this crazy, amazing mix of cultures and languages.
That's the beauty of it, right? The differences are what make it so rich.
Okay, so we're wrapping up our Babel deep dive, but I want to leave everyone with one last thought to chew on.
Hit me with it.
We've talked about Babel as this warning sign, but what if it's also a challenge?
Ooh, I like that. A challenge to do better.
To build better relationships, to communicate more thoughtfully, to really, truly see each other.
Because remember, the story doesn't end with the tower crashing down. It ends with new beginnings, new languages, new ways of being.
And it's our choice, what we build from here. What are our towers? Are they things that divide us or things that connect us?
Big questions, but worth asking ourselves. Because Babel reminds us, we have the power to choose what we create.
That's it for our deep dive into the Tower of Babel. Thanks for listening.